Two people, same age, same job, same paycheck, same savings. One is about to sign a 30-year mortgage, the other a 12-month lease. 30 years from now, one of these decisions will look like a genius move, the other a mistake. Nobody agrees on which is which. So today, no hot takes, just 30 years of real numbers for two people making very different bets on their future. Meet Jake and Paul. Both 30, both earning $75,000 a year, both with $65,000 saved. Jake wants roots, a place that's permanently his. Paul wants flexibility. He doesn't know where he'll be in 5 years, and he likes it that way. So Jake buys, Paul rents. Let's follow both for 30 years and see who actually builds more wealth. Jake finds a $340,000 house. He puts down 15%, $51,000, plus $9,000 in closing costs, leaving him a $289,000 loan at 6.8% over 30 years. Because his down payment is under 20%, his lender also requires PMI, about $120 a month, until he builds enough equity to drop it. Jake's monthly numbers: principal and interest, $1,884. Property tax, $310. Homeowner's insurance, $140. PMI, $120. Maintenance reserve, budgeted at roughly 1% of home value a year, $283. Total monthly housing cost, $2,737. Meanwhile, Paul rents a similar 3-bedroom place nearby for $1,950 a month. No property tax, no insurance, no PMI. If the roof leakage, that's his landlord's problem. That's a monthly gap of $787 in Paul's favor. He doesn't spend it. He takes his $65,000 and puts it into a low-cost index fund and invests that extra $787 every single month too. Let's kill a phrase that gets thrown around constantly. Renting is throwing money away. At least a mortgage builds equity. In Jake's first payment, $1,638 is interest. Only $246 actually goes toward the loan balance. So out of his $2,737 total housing cost, only $246 builds equity. The rest is simply the cost of housing him, same as rent. Comparing Jake's equity to Paul's full rent isn't a fair fight. Compare total cost to total cost. Fast forward 3 years. On a real 30-year amortization schedule, Jake's loan balance has fallen to about $279,200, roughly $9,800 of principal paid off. His house, appreciating around 3.5% a year, is now worth roughly $377,000, and his loan-to-value has dropped just under 74%, so his PMI drops off around now. That's about $97,800 in home equity. Paul has paid $70,200 in rent over 3 years, none of it recoverable, but his original $65,000, growing at an average 9% annual return, has become roughly $84,000. Add 3 years of his monthly contributions and their growth, and his total portfolio sits around $114,000, already about $16,300 ahead of Jake and far more liquid. Two forces are now quietly working in opposite directions. Jake's principal and interest payment is frozen at $1,884 in year 1, year 15, and year 30. Inflation doesn't touch it. A recession doesn't touch it. Paul's rent is not frozen. At just 3% a year, it climbs from $1,950 toward $2,620 by year 10 and past $3,500 by year 20. His original $787 monthly advantage shrinks every single year until it disappears completely, and his rent eventually overtakes what Jake pays on his mortgage. But Paul still has an ace that never showed up in the monthly comparison: opportunity cost. His original $65,000 has been compounding in the market this entire time, completely independent of what rent or mortgage payments are doing. That's the single biggest lever in this entire story. Jake and Paul are both 40 now. Jake's house is worth roughly $480,000, but on the real amortization schedule, his loan balance has only fallen to about $246,800. That's roughly $232,800 in home equity. A 30-year loan front-loads interest hard, even 10 years in. Less than a fifth of the original balance is gone. Paul's original $65,000 alone has grown to about $154,000. Add a decade of monthly contributions, shrinking slightly each year as rent rises, and his total portfolio is worth roughly $258,000. Paul is now ahead by about $25,000, and his rent has climbed to $2,620 a month versus Jake's still frozen $1,884. Jake and Paul are both 50. Jake's house is now worth roughly $677,000. But here's the number people get wrong. After 20 years on this 30-year loan, Jake still owes about $163,700, not close to paid off. A 6.8% loan takes roughly 21 to 22 years just to reach the halfway point. That leaves Jake with approximately $513,000 in home equity. Paul's original $65,000 alone has grown to roughly $364,000. Add 20 years of monthly investing, and his total portfolio lands at approximately $614,000. On pure net worth, Paul is ahead by roughly $101,000, not a photo finish. Renting and actually investing the difference meaningfully outbuilt buying here. But their wealth doesn't behave the same way. Paul's rent has climbed to roughly $3,520 a month, with no ceiling and no finish line. Jake has 10 years left on his mortgage, and then his largest monthly expense simply ends. One of them is looking at a bill that keeps climbing indefinitely. The other is looking at a bill with an expiration date. Here's the uncomfortable part. Paul's result depends on him actually investing the difference every single month for 20 years. Easy in a spreadsheet, hard in real life, a wedding, a nicer car, a market crash that makes investing feel like the worst idea ever, right when it's actually the best time. A mortgage doesn't ask for discipline. The bank just takes it. That's the strongest argument for buying. That has nothing to do with rates or appreciation. But buying has weak points too. Sell too early and closing costs plus interest-heavy payments can wipe out the advantage. Buying needs time. Mobility suffers. A move means selling or becoming a long-distance landlord. Concentration risk is real. Paul owns thousands of companies, Jake owns one house on one street, and liquidity matters. Paul can sell part of his portfolio in days. Jake couldn't sell 20% of his bedroom, so he need to refinance, borrow, or sell. It comes down to two questions. How long are you staying? Buying generally needs 7+ years for the math to turn favorable. And will you genuinely invest the difference? On autopilot, renting can outperform buying. This scenario is proof. Spent on lifestyle instead, the advantage disappears. Quick check. The price-to-rent ratio, price divided by annual rent. Jake's $340,000 divided by Paul's $23,400 annual rent is about 14.5. Under 15 leans toward buying, above 20 toward renting. This one leans buying on paper, yet Paul still came out ahead because he actually kept investing. That's what the ratio can't measure. And it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Buying doesn't mean investing stops. Jake didn't lose, and Paul didn't win by luck. They both made a trade. Jake traded flexibility for stability. Paul traded certainty for freedom, and in this case, a bigger number. 20 years later, the difference wasn't really about the choice on day one, it was about what they did after. So next time someone tells you renting is throwing money away, renters pay rent, owners pay interest, tax, insurance, and maintenance. Everybody's paying for housing, just differently. The real question was never renting or buying. It was always, what will you actually do with the difference? If this broke the math down in a way that made sense, hit subscribe. I do this every week for the financial decisions nobody explains properly. Let me know in the comments. Are you Team Jake, Team Paul, or Team waiting for rates to do literally anything else? See you in the next one.